You keep calling it growth, but really, it's grief. You're not healing, you're shrinking, not to evolve, but to remain lovable to those who never saw you. You call it progress, but it's performance. You silence your pain to stay digestible. You rewrite your truth so it doesn't disturb theirs. But tell me, how many times have you trimmed your roots just to fit inside someone else's garden? You were never broken. They just couldn't hold your wholeness, so you became smaller, softer, quieter. You called it healing, but it was really submission. To the ones who couldn't love your unedited self, they taught you that love comes with edits, with rewrites, with guilt. And so, you keep fixing what was never wrong with you, just to stay inside a story that never included your truth. Isn't it absurd that the more broken they were, the more you blamed yourself for shattering? You became their mirror and mistook their cracks for your own. You thought if you became more, you'd finally be enough, more forgiving, more patient, more pleasing. You wore their silence like a verdict and kept showing up to trials you never deserved. You fix yourself because that's what you were taught love required. You were taught love meant becoming easier, quieter, less emotional, more convenient. And so, you erased yourself slowly until they were comfortable. And now, you don't know where you end and where their needs begin. Your self-worth was built on not making waves, even when your soul was drowning. You keep fixing yourself because part of you still believes that if you change enough, they'll finally come back. That if you become perfect, they'll finally stay. But they didn't leave because you were too much. They left because they couldn't sit with their own emptiness. And you just happened to hold up the mirror too long. Now you're trying to make sense of the pain by turning yourself into a project, as if your softness was the problem. But you were never too much. They were simply too little for your depth. You keep re-entering the fire, hoping this time you won't get burned. You say it's healing, but it's hope, disguised as self-blame. If I'm more secure, more spiritual, more patient, maybe they'll finally see me. Maybe they'll stay. But what if the healing you're chasing is just a new cage, designed to win their approval, not your freedom? You don't need to be better to be loved. You need to be loved when you're not better. It's a quiet kind of betrayal. When you hold back your tears so they don't call you dramatic. When you walk on eggshells and then apologize for bleeding. You never ask too much. You just ask the wrong people. But now, even silence feels loud. Even stillness feels dangerous. Because your body remembers what it cost you to be soft, to need, to stay. Go back far enough, and you'll find the origin. The moment your love became a burden, the moment they sighed when you cried, the moment your needs were labeled too much. You were taught to please, before you were taught to feel, taught to perform, before you were allowed to exist. And so, you began fixing yourself before anyone ever asked you to, because somewhere deep inside, you feared that being you was the reason they left. It's absurd, isn't it? How much self-work you've done, just to be tolerable to people who never did the same. You read the books, went to therapy, became emotionally mature, all while they stayed frozen in their wounds. But still, you blame your tone, your timing, your tears. You became a better version of yourself, not for your growth, but for their comfort. And they never noticed. You don't want revenge. You want recognition. You want someone to say, I see how much you tried. I see how much of yourself you buried to be loved. I see how loud your silence was. But they won't say it, because they were never listening. So now, You say it to yourself. You become the one who sees. Because waiting for them to return your depth is how you stay broken. But meeting yourself in the wreckage, that's how you begin again. It's a quiet kind of betrayal. When you hold back your tears so they don't call you dramatic. When you walk on eggshells and then apologize for bleeding. You never ask too much. You just ask the wrong people. But now, even silence feels loud. Even stillness feels dangerous. Because your body remembers what it cost you. To be soft. To need. To stay. You bent yourself into softness, thinking it would protect you. But they didn't love you softer. They just pushed harder. You made yourself small, so their ego could feel big. You made yourself available, so their loneliness didn't feel so loud. And when they drained you, they called you needy, as if your emptiness was the problem. But no one asked what it cost you to be their calm, what it took to never be the storm. You kept fixing yourself, because no one ever came to repair what they broke. So you became the parent, the therapist, the savior. You called it strength, but it was desperation wearing a brave face. You cleaned up their chaos, and they called it codependency. But the truth is, you just didn't want anyone else to feel what you did. And that's not weakness, that's unspoken courage. You confuse peace with being palatable, but they're not the same. You silence your truth, so the room stays calm. You dim your grief, so their discomfort doesn't flare. And yet, you call it regulation, healing, growth. But real peace doesn't ask you to disappear. It doesn't punish your volume or question your sadness. Real peace doesn't cost your voice. You keep fixing yourself, not to be better, but to be accepted. You keep changing, not because you want to evolve, but because you're scared of being left behind. But what if the leaving was the gift? What if being abandoned was how the lie died? And now, you no longer need to be chosen, because you finally chose yourself. You were never too much. You were just born into rooms too small for your fire. They couldn't hold your tears, so you dried them in secret. They couldn't love your noise, so you turned your joy into silence. And now, you keep fixing yourself to be loved, still chasing the echo of a childhood ache. But that child in you doesn't need to be fixed. They just need to be found and told. You were never the problem.